Now thankfully I've never been to prison and I don't plan on ever changing that. However, have I thought about how I would escape if I was there? 100%. I feel like everybody has. The most common way I saw growing up, albeit mainly in cartoons, was tying a bunch of bed sheets together to make a rope and then climbing down it outside your window, which is a foolproof plan unless of course you don't have a window in your cell or bed sheets, or you happen to be on like the 40th floor. What is up you guys? Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hassan and welcome back to another video. Now I don't think I can manage it even if I tried, but the people on this list definitely did. Now before I get into it, remember to check out our comedy channel Top 10 Central. It's actually hilarious. I love the videos we film. I feel like you guys will definitely enjoy them too, so click somewhere here. But without further ado, these are the top 10 scary prison escapes. Starting us off at number 10 is Frank ABAGNALE, and if that name sounds familiar then you've probably watched Catch Me If You Can, starring a young Leonardo DiCaprio, because that's who the film was based on. Frank had been committing crimes since the age of 15 and became one of the most notorious imposters ever, occupying nearly 8 identities. His first escape occurred when he was getting deported to the US. He somehow managed to escape off a British plane that had just landed at JFK. How do you even escape a taxiing plane? It's literally still moving. Either way, a few days later he was caught by the RCMP in Montreal and handed over to Border Patrol. In 1971, while he was awaiting his trial, he managed to escape from the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta. His accompanying US Marshal had idiotically forgotten his detention commitment papers, and so Frank used that to his advantage and convinced guards that he was an undercover prison inspector. This act even got him better treatment and food than other inmates. He went further by contacting an accomplice on the outside and making her bring him his own inspector business card, as well as a fake Sean O'Reilly business card, Sean being the FBI agent in charge of his case. He made up some story about needing to meet with Sean immediately, and so he was literally allowed to just walk out of the prison unaccompanied to meet Sean, where he then was obviously picked up by his accomplice. And he did all of this before turning 22. Coming in at number 9 is John Dillinger, aka Public Enemy Number 1. You have to be pretty freaking bad for the FBI to name you Public Enemy Number 1. John Dillinger was an American gangster and murderer that was super active during the Great Depression. The terror gang he worked with was accused of robbing over 24 banks and 4 police stations. Now, the first time he was arrested, he was taken to a jail in Indiana where he befriended 8 seasoned bank robbers who helped him with his first escape later on. After being paroled, John immediately went back to committing crime, and in August of 1933 he was robbing a bank and was later caught and arrested by police. Once back in his cell, he hatched a plan with his previous inmate friends. They smuggled guns into their cells and escaped 4 days after he had been incarcerated. John and his gang were arrested again a year later in Indiana and were taken to Crown Point Jail, a jail said to be escape-proof. Clearly they hadn't met our man yet. On March 3rd, John and another inmate used a fake gun that he'd apparently carved out of wood from the shelving in his cell and blackened with shoe polish. The guards were fooled by his weapon, thinking it was real, and let him walk. He continued on his crime spree before he was finally killed in a shootout with the FBI a few months later. At number 8 we have Alfred George HINDS. Alfie was a British criminal who grew up rough in a children's home after his dad died while receiving 10 lashes for stealing. And the apple clearly doesn't fall far from the tree, because Alfie went on to become a robber himself. Daddy would have been proud of you, son. Now while serving a 12-year prison sentence for jewelry robbery, Alfie managed to escape from not 1, not 2, but 3 high security prisons. The first one came in 1958 when he was locked up in Nottingham prison. He somehow managed to get through a series of locked doors and over a 20-foot wall, which earned him the name Houdini HINDS. He stayed free for nearly a year before being arrested once again, this time by Scotland Yard detectives. This time though, he brought a lawsuit against authorities for illegal arrest, which meant he would have to be taken to the law courts. Time for escape numero dos. On the way there, the truck stopped so Alfie could use the bathroom. When his 2 escorts took his handcuffs off, he bundled them both into the cubicle and put a padlock on so they couldn't get out. Sadly, the taste of freedom only lasted 5 hours before he was re-arrested at the airport. His third and final escape was from Chelmsford prison a year later. He fled to Ireland after that, living there for 2 years under an assumed name before he was caught again. I mean, the man's perseverance, I'll give him that. Good on you. Filling our number 7 slot is the Texas 7. Dubbed as the biggest prison break in Texas history, this colossal event took place back in December of 2000. The criminals were serving time at the maximum security prison called the John B. Connolly Unit. The 7 were led by 30-year-old George Rivas, who was serving 18 consecutive 15 to life sentences for kidnapping and robbery. The other men included 2 convicted murderers, a child abuser, and the rest were all sexual predators. What a gang. But I have to give it to them, their plan was very well executed. The escape started at lunchtime, which was the slowest period of the prison day, and there was usually less surveillance in certain areas at that time as well. One of the men would call someone over while another one would hit them over the head. Once the person was unconscious, the men would steal their clothing and then tie and gag them. The assailants managed to overpower 9 civilian maintenance supervisors, 4 officers, and 3 other inmates. Following the plan, the men then acted like prison officers on the phone to evade suspicion. Then 3 of the civilian disguised men went to the back gate pretending to install video monitors when really they were there to raid and steal weapons from the guard tower. They then quickly stole a pickup truck and picked up the 4 other inmates still inside the prison. I feel like as soon as everyone got in the van, everyone's like, "Hey, whole lot of gang shit, we made it." That's what I would have done, personally. Now at number 6 is Pascal Payet. Okay, despite being a criminal, I was wowed by Pascal after reading his story. So Pascal was a French thief and murderer who escaped 3 prisons, which has already been done by others on our list, but not with this much panache. So Pascal was a French thief and murderer who escaped 3 prisons, which has already been done by others on this list, but not with the same panache as Pascal. Pascal did it with, it was beautiful. In October 2001, he escaped from a prison located in the village of Luina. Hopefully I said that right, I probably didn't, but I tried my best. He did that by hitching a ride on a hijacked helicopter that his friends landed on the roof of the facility. It took a record 6 days for him to be captured again and sent back to the same jail. After 2 years of being locked up, he literally organized the exact same escape he did before, except this time he took 3 more prisoners with him. Oh come on people, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. He used the exact same way. Did you guys literally learn nothing after the first time? Either way, Pascal was caught again and sentenced to 30 years in prison for murdering someone in 2005. At this point, he was one of, if not the most closely surveilled prisoner in France. They were so scared he'd escape again, they moved him to a different prison every 6 months. His third escape came in the form of Bastille Day, when 4 masked men hijacked a helicopter and used it to free Pascal once again. He's literally the flying escapee. I love it. Coming in at number 5 is Michel VAUJOUR. This one's a little bit funny and a little bit ridiculous, so I was like, why not? Michel was a French thief and murderer who had 12 convictions in his name, meaning he had to serve around 95 years in prison. His wife Nadine was desperate to get him out, so together they hatched a plan which involved her taking numerous helicopter flight lessons. In May of 1986, Michel had somehow painted nectarines to look like grenades. He used them to force his way onto the prison's roof, where his wife conveniently picked him up in a helicopter. The duo landed in a random football field and then fled by car, but sadly their reunion ended sooner rather than later. Nadine was captured somewhere in southwestern France, and Michel was shot in the head later on during a failed robbery job. Nectarines? Who would have thought? At number 4 is the key. So America has Alcatraz, and in the 20th century, Britain's version of Alcatraz was Parkhurst Prison, located on the Isle of Wight. Matthew Williams, Keith Rose, and Andrew Roger were all serving time there for things like planting a bomb and murder, so you don't want to mess with these guys. All 3 inmates worked in the prison's metal sheet shop, which meant they had access to an array of tools that other inmates didn't. They hatched a plan which involved memorizing the outline of a guard's master key and then making a replica in the shop. In early 1995, they set the plan into motion. The key allowed them to get through any set of doors in the facility, and they had even made a homemade gun in case things went south. Preparation, I like it. When the trio reached the mesh fence, they cut through it and used a 25-foot steel ladder they had made to scale the wall. The plan was a success, and the trio went to the town of Sandown hatching their next illegal plan before being caught by an off-duty prison officer. After that slap in the face, Parkhurst was no longer considered the British Alcatraz. And I mean rightly so. Filling at number 3 slot is Choi Ka-bok. I think the way this man escaped jail impressed me more than anyone on this list, hands down. Back in September of 2012, yoga master Choi was suspected for robbery and later arrested and put in a cell at a police station in Daegu. He was there for a whopping 5 days before deciding enough of this shit, we out here. On the 17th, he applied an ointment on the upper part of his body, making him slippery, which was key for his plan. He then escaped by sliding through the tiny food slot at the bottom of his cell. His ingenious plan took 34 seconds to execute, and you can bet your ass it was all thanks to all that yoga. Standing at 5'4" himself, which is my height, the slot he had to fit into was 5.9 inches tall and 17.7 inches wide. Are you kidding? 5.9 inches is 15 centimeters, you guys. My head wouldn't even fit through that. He did it while the guards were asleep and even made a makeshift chair out of pillows and blankets to fool the guards, an idea he got from Shawshank Redemption. The Korean Houdini was captured 2 days later after a massive manhunt was ordered. But God, in the food slot. Now at number 2 is Alcatraz, and I wasn't going to include this infamous escape story on the list because I figured everyone had already heard about it, but then I was like, they've heard it for a reason, it's sick and it's frickin' Alcatraz. Deemed unescapable, the maximum security prison is literally an island. If you did escape, death was very much plausible in the water. On the 11th of June 1962, 3 inmates put their escape plan into action. They had created paper mache dummies and stuck hair on them collected from the prison's barbershop and left them in their cells as decoys. They then escaped through a tunnel they had spent a year digging with a spoon. From there, they went to an unused service corridor, to a ventilation shaft, and finally to the roof. From there, they scaled a fence and made a DIY raft out of things they had stolen from the prison and set sail at 10 p.m. Guards didn't even realize the trio were missing till the next morning, but the men were never seen again. The FBI spent ages looking for them near and around the area, but after 17 years of investigating, they concluded the trio most likely drowned in the water. Or they're just very good at living undetectable lives. And finally, at number 1 is YOSHIE Shiratori. This man became infamous in Japan as an anti-hero since he had escaped from jail 4 bloody times. YOSHIE was arrested because he was forced to confess to a murder he never committed and therefore sentenced to life plus 23 years. YOSHIE was arrested because he was forced to confess to a murder he never committed and therefore sentenced to life plus 23 years. Yes, he did falsely confess to a murder, but that doesn't make the guy sweet. The man was a deadly jack of all trades, you guys. He could scale walls, pick locks, and dislocate any of his joints at will. He was sent to Aomori prison where he was tortured and beaten by the guards every single night, and the cherry on top of all of that was that prosecutors were seeking the death penalty for him, so he was like, gotta go. At 5:30 a.m. when the prison guards were on break, he used a metal wire he had stolen from the bathroom to pick his cell lock, and then numerous other door locks before making it out of the prison. Finally making it out of the prison. He was recaptured 3 days later and put into the same prison, but transferred to Akita prison 6 years later, where he was ridiculed by guards. He was put into a special solitary confinement cell with extremely high walls and only one small skylight window. The room was designed to be inescapable, but YOSHIE proved them wrong. One night, as a guard checked in on him, he found the cell empty and his handcuffs on the ground. He'd picked the handcuff lock and scaled the wall like a freaking lizard and escaped through the skylight window that he'd been loosening for months. 2 years later, he was jailed again, this time in Abashiri prison, where he used miso soup to rust off his handcuffs and inspection hall. He was then caught again and sentenced to death, so he had to escape this time, and he did again. YOSHIE dug a tunnel and escaped for a record 4th time. Honestly, I'm so impressed with this man, I cannot even. And that is it for today's video, guys. I definitely wouldn't be able to escape jail. I'd try my best, I'd probably fail. Let me know how you do it if you had to do it in the comments below. As always, I'm your host, Eamon Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!